Burkina Faso, France Africa in Capilot, by Ramzy Baroud. If it was obvious that Burkina Faso was going to end up following Mali and the Central African Republic, RCA, Ouagadougou's decision to break his military ties with France was not as simple as the media wants it to be. The widespread idea would have these countries turn away from their former colonial master, France, to forge alternative alliances with a new ally, Russia. These convenient analyses are largely influenced by the geopolitical ironhand between the old and new superpowers, the United States and its NATO allies on one hand, and Russia and China on the other. While global rivalry, especially in the resourceful African continent, is an important element in understanding Burkina Faso's decision, and similar decisions by Mali in April and the RCA in December, it is important to pay more attention to the logic of political discourse in these African countries. On the 21st of January, Burkina Faso officially asked France to withdraw its troops from the country within a month. French President Macron seemed surprised at this request. He said he would like clarifications from Burkina Faso's transitional president, Ibrahim Traoré. The Paris confusion didn't last long, though. At the present stage, we do not see how to be clearer than this, Burkina government spokesman Rintalbajan Emmanuel Adriogo said on the 23rd of January on national television. Ouagadougou's decision referred to 400 French soldiers stationed in the country following a military agreement signed with Paris in 2018. But first of all, what were those soldiers doing in Burkina Faso? The agreement between Paris and Ouagadougou was part of a series of agreements signed between France and several African countries to form regional economic and military alliances, presumed that France would help those countries gain stability in the face of threats from various armed groups. Mali, which has undergone a series of military coups and murderous rebels that threatened to divide the country, was the focal point of French military redeployment in Africa, leading to the launch of several major campaigns starting in January 2013 with Operation Serval and later Operation Barkhane. Over time, the French government has claimed one victory after the other against various armed groups, always justifying its action in the context of regional agreements signed at the invitation of African countries, mostly based in the Sahel region. His haters have often replied by saying that France, which actually controls the economy of 14 African countries by owning a significant share of their currencies and national reserves, is not an equal partner in Africa, but an ingenious. This latest statement has gained credibility over time because there is no evidence that the Serval and Barkhane operations have achieved the intended objectives, nor that any of the countries involved in the French system have achieved political or economic stability. While military coups have been commonplace in many African countries following the official end of colonialism on the continent, the new governments of Mali, RCA and Burkina Faso have resorted to a different political discourse, blaming the old one's treason regimes, while imputing a large part of the corruption of these countries to France. Burkina Faso was no exception. On the 30th of September, a military coup in Burkina Faso toppled the government. Anti-French sentiments were manifested in the used vocabulary and slogans in the streets, and the French flag was repeatedly burned and replaced by the Russian flag. This is where the news analysis gets it wrong often. When Russian flags were waved in large numbers in the streets of Burkina Faso, many assumed that the whole phenomenon was the result of French-Russian rivalry in the region. Although this geopolitical conflict is real, the behavior of Burkina Faso's Traoré government cannot be reduced to political opportunism and bribery. Wherever it comes, like Mali and the RCA, and other African countries, Burkina Faso never had any real political margins that would have stood out from its former colonial masters. These margins existed, but they were almost completely eliminated after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The USSR was seen as a trusted ally by various African governments, which used Soviet support to counterbalance Western influences and pressures on the highly disputed continent. The disappearance of the USSR meant the end of this balance and the complete return of Africa under the Western sphere. The evolution of global political dynamics resulting from rivalries between the United States, NATO, Russia and China has opened some of these margins again. The countries that dared to be the first to pass into the other camp, Mali, the RCA and now Burkina Faso, were the countries that had little to lose in this political challenge. They have no political stability, little sovereignty and no economic outlook. This means that the future could be marked by more geopolitical changes of this type. The nature and speed of these changes will largely be determined by the outcome of the ongoing global conflict. Burkina Faso's decision to order French troops to leave the country has a link to world geopolitics, but only in terms of a calendar. The real reason is that the French military presence in the country presented no real benefit to Burkina Faso. Ouagadougou seems to have reached the same conclusion as Bamako and Bangui last month, and it was really only a matter of time. Source: Palestine Chronicle.